confronting all of us today, but we couldn't have a better group of people discussing it. So we're in for fantastic.
Let's begin with David Anderson in understanding the biology of aggression.
So, Charlie, we're basic neuroscientists in my lab, and we want to understand some of the most fundamental questions about aggression. How is aggression, which is an evolutionarily ancient behavior, you see it throughout the animal kingdom, how is that hardwired into the brain? Where is aggression in the brain? And we've studied this problem in flies and in mice, and we're particularly interested in the relationship between the parts of the brain that control aggression and those that control mating or sexual behavior, because, as you know, mating and aggression are closely related behaviors, and in nature you often find that periods of aggression are at their highest when animals are mating, and these behaviors reinforce each other, but at the same time they're mutually exclusive. So a male will direct mating towards a female of the species, aggression towards another male. So there's kind of a paradox. How can these behaviors be mutually exclusive but also reinforce each other in some way? So we've begun by trying to pinpoint the neurons that control aggressive behavior. And we've started by looking in a very evolutionarily ancient region of the brain, which Eric brought up, called the hypothalamus. So we began by trying to measure the electrical activity of cells that were active during aggression or mating in a tiny region of the hypothalamus. And we found something quite surprising, and that is within this very small region of the brain, we found a mixture of neurons, some of which were active, turned on when the animals were fighting. This is done in males. Some of which were turned on when the animals were mating with a female. And interestingly, some of these neurons were active during both fighting and mating. About 25% of them overlap. So that was a very interesting observation. It was a correlation, and we really wanted to understand the function of these neurons. And so we began by using very modern techniques now called optogenetics to activate and inhibit these neurons. And we can pinpoint this activation with a high level of accuracy directly to specific cells in the brain that are active during aggression and turn them on and turn them off with a time resolution of milliseconds. So I'm going to show you a video of what happens to a male mouse when you activate these aggression neurons in the brain. And I should say before we show the video, some of your viewers might find the image a bit disturbing, but what we're doing doesn't hurt the mouse. And these are all protocols that have been approved by our Institutional Animal Use and Care Committee and our NIH approved. So you're going to see the mouse in a cage with an inanimate object. When the light comes on, we're stimulating these aggression neurons in the mouse. So we can actually trigger the mouse to attack a rubber glove. Now, of course, if there were another mouse there, he would attack the other mouse as well. So we then wanted to ask, are these neurons actually necessary for normal aggression? And so mice will normally fight with each other. For example, if you introduce an intruder mouse into the cage where a male mouse lives, very shortly thereafter, the resident mouse will attack the intruder. He doesn't like somebody impinging on his territory. And so we asked, if we shut these neurons off, can we actually stop a fight dead in its tracks? And as the next video will show you, it's possible to do that. So now these mice are fighting naturally. When the light comes on, we inhibit these neurons, and suddenly the fight stops. And we'll show you that again in slow motion. So you can see the mice are fighting, and suddenly the light comes on, boom, we stop the attack dead in its tracks.
Okay, I don't understand how the neurons know to respond to light.
So the way that we do this is we genetically implant in these neurons deep in the brain a protein that comes from a light-sensitive algae. And that protein makes an ion channel through the membrane of the neuron that turns the neuron on only when light activates that channel. So we can convert these neurons into light-sensitive neurons. So that shows us that these neurons are necessary and sufficient for aggression.
There are different kinds of channels you can insert, those that activate the neurons and those that shut it off, and he can do either.
So we discovered as we were manipulating the conditions for turning these neurons on, something very surprising. And that is that you needed high-intensity stimulation to activate aggression, but low-intensity stimulation would promote mounting behavior. So the mouse would try to mate with whatever other mouse was in the cage with low-intensity stimulation. Whether it was a male mouse, a female mouse, it would try to mount. And we could actually switch the behavior of the same animal from attempted mounting to a mixture of mounting and attack to attack just by increasing the intensity of light. So that tells us that in this tiny region of the brain, there is a mixture of neurons that are controlling both the mating instinct and the fighting instinct, and perhaps that will account or may account for the tension between the sex drive and the aggressive drive.
This is extraordinary.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It also sort of explains why aggression can lead to sexual aggression.
Yeah.
It really is an amazing set of findings.
Okay, let me turn to Richard and some sense of how children become predisposed to violence.
Well, we've been following thousands of children from